Ezekiel stood indifferently and watched. A few months ago, he noticed that this character was brought to Alabasta by the world government. In terms of pure strength, Kazuru referred to Weeble as possessing the power of Whitebeard when he was young. This guy's strength is no joke, because this bastard actually defeated an admiral. 5 years ago, when Zephyr was 65, this guy attacked his ship, killed nearly all his students and subordinates, and severely damaged his right hand. This record is quite significant. Although Weeble himself was also almost mortally wounded, he managed to escape in the end. In other words, Weeble's actual combat power should be nearly equal to Zephyr's. It can't be said that Fujitara's strength is weak, after all, he is an admiral. Just consider the difference between Kazuru's and Zephyr's strengths when they fight. In fact, when he noticed this guy, Ezekiel was prepared to fight Zephyr. The world government was confident that Zephyr was sent directly to him, but they also cooperated with Zephyr's doomed enemy. The world government must have paid attention to Fujitara. He is an amazing figure who currently helps Alabasta, boasting admiral-level combat power. Ezekiel launched Taoxiao and published the news, as well as conducted a live broadcast on the forum. And, for the first time, he used a new feature that can only be achieved after entering 4G. Live GIF. Junior Whitebeard breaks into the capital of Alabasta, Ulubarna. A great pirate is approaching. Where is the hero? Where, after all, is Zephyr? The fighting power of Alabasta, the supreme force, the guardian of the royal family. Soon, all users with mobile phones were bombarded with constant advertising attacks, prompting them to pull out their mobile phones to check headlines and news on the forum. Including the bounty for Edward Weeble. Photos of this scene were posted on the forum, and only then did people understand what was happening in Ulubarna. A super large pirate with a bounty of 480 million is attempting to attack Ulubarna. At this time in Alabasta, there were people who could directly oppose or even defeat this man. Who is this blind samurai? Ezekiel started making animated photos of the two fighting and posted them on the forum. Through this, people felt the intensity of the battle and gained enough understanding of the monstrous strength of these two. My god, these two guys are so strong. What monsters? Someone was shocked. Is this the samurai known as the fighting force of the Alabasta royal family? Do we really have such a strong warrior in Alabasta? Some people couldn't believe it. Ezekiel desperately promoted Fujitara's strength and individuality, which brought him completely to the forefront. Gravity sword. Boom. Fierce tiger. Boom. This fight essentially represents a one-sided beating of Edward Weeble. No matter how strong he was, Weeble couldn't defeat Fujitara when faced with a being of admiral-level power. Fujitara's techniques made people realize that he was undoubtedly a monster. Especially in the eyes of some knowledgeable individuals, Fujitara had certainly reached the level of admirals. Fujitara worked very hard. In less than 30 minutes, Edward Weeble was beaten nearly to death. Even Ezekiel was a bit frightened. He had a clear understanding of how strong a 50-year-old admiral-level individual was, someone who had accumulated battle experience and whose overall strength was also at its peak. Damn it. Let's run. Miss Bakken screamed, realizing that Weeble definitely couldn't defeat Fujitara. She rushed towards Ezekiel as if her abilities alone were enough to capture the king. Just as her hand was about to touch Will. Gotcha. A smile even appeared on his face. You think I'm that weak? Ezekiel's slightly narrowed eyes opened. An unfamiliar yet familiar power surged from his heart and flowed out like a torrent, twisting Miss Bakken's face in terror, causing her entire body to tremble. This intense shock nearly made her faint. Conqueror's Haki. Ezekiel was also a little surprised. He had just truly awakened Conqueror's Haki. Perhaps it was his royal dignity that made him incapable of tolerating such contempt. What is the so-called Conqueror's Haki? Is it a natural talent or an acquired ability? There is no doubt that it is a sign of genius, and it has almost nothing to do with acquired powers. The royal family of Alabasta is one of the 20 royal families that in the past refused to become celestial dragons. They renounced the right to become world nobility and the opportunity to rule the world, solely to protect for generations the illusory legend of the ancient weapon Pluton. They possessed endless courage and wisdom, for if a royal family is not qualified, then no country can even dream of greatness. After initially uniting hundreds of millions of people and governing this vast empire combined with growing power and ambitions, Conqueror's Haki finally burst forth. Fujitora was shocked that Will had awakened Conqueror's Haki. Though it was indeed surprising, after all Ezekiel was a king with such a unique talent. But he felt an unparalleled dominance unseen in recent years. There were many who possessed Conqueror's Haki, but this Haki was special. This kind of power is not a simple strength that pirates possess, but a type of regal dominance, a sort of near divinity. Arrogant. Pell had already transformed into a falcon and tried to seize Miss Bakken, but she dodged him at the last possible moment. This elderly woman is so unpredictable. She has some power after all, considering that anyone who can beat Weeble, a tank-like figure who is now shouting in pain, must have the strength to catch a chicken. She was indeed once a comrade of Whitebeard. Whitebeard founded his pirate crew about 34 years ago. Before that, he was once a member of the famous Rocks Pirates. It was almost 40 years ago when he joined the Rocks Pirates. Interestingly, Edward Weeble is currently 31 years old, and will be 33 when Luffy sets out to sea 2 years later. Regardless of whether this old woman was on the Rocks ship or another, she managed to survive at sea for more than 30 or 40 years. How could she be weak? Of course. She is strong. At least she is at a level that Pell has reached. Only now did the world government respond. The guy they considered a trump card didn't follow the agreement, and went straight to Alubarna. What the hell did he want to do? That bastard. What is he planning to do? The Den Den Mushi mimicked Zolo's distorted face as he addressed the CP agent of Alabasta. He destroyed the walls of Alubarna, claiming he would capture the King of Alabasta. The agent could only report what he had seen. What an idiot. Zolo's face was extremely angry. Doesn't he know that Zephyr is assigned to the royal family of Alabasta? Has the identity of the samurai been established? He's a wandering warrior who has roamed the world for many years, not a pirate, and it's unclear what ties he has with the royal family of Alabasta. The agent reported. Zolo paused, his thoughts quickly shifting, and he said the final word. Forget it. I'll contact Zephyr now. What he truly didn't anticipate were Weeble's personal actions and Fujitora's appearance. Before Fujitora appeared, neither the creation of the Rivers of Life, the advent of mobile phones, nor even Will becoming the new king had such an impact. Now he took it to heart. Thanks to the broadcasts from Taoshao and the forum, he clearly saw, the guy who can bring down Weeble with one hand likely possesses strength nearly at Admiral level. Admiral level. Is Alabasta, with such combat power, still the helpless kingdom they oppressed in the past? Clearly that's impossible. But Zolo also knows that if he wants to deal with Alabasta, perhaps now is the best time. After all, former Admiral Zephyr is in Alubarna. If Zephyr can hold off Fujitora, handling Alabasta would be no problem for him. Blub blub blub. To prevent phone tapping, he doesn't use a cell phone for conversations while working and still relies on the Den Den Mushi. What happened? Why didn't Zephyr pick up the phone? After a long time, the Den Den Mushi still wasn't responding, and Zolo was a bit puzzled. Ezekiel didn't stop the battle between Pell and Miss Bakken. After all, his surroundings were gradually gaining strength and weren't afraid to give their lives. Defeating Miss Bakken was a trivial matter, and it wasn't worth showcasing his own power. It was only a matter of time before Pell would defeat her. In an icy palace stood an ice sculpture. It really was a sculpture made from real ice. Crack. The ice sculpture finally began to crack slowly, starting from the enormous metal hand of a giant man inch by inch, little by little, until finally, cracks formed right on the face, which was a terrifying and wrinkled old face. SHHH. Air escaped from the cracks. A voice sounded as if from the abyss through clenched teeth. Ezekiel. Ezekiel. Boom. The ice shattered more intensely, and almost the whole body was covered in cracks. Ezekiel, I'm going to kill you. With a crash, the entire ice sculpture fell apart, leaving numerous holes in the palace. The floor was crushed by the mighty body, as if every muscle in it had awakened from a deep sleep. This admiral is famous for his physical skills. Under the icy stimulation, all the muscle memories that had been dormant for decades were awakened. The powerful body surged like water ripples, moving with the shaking of hands and body, then becoming hotter and redder, leaving icy fragments all over, resembling evaporating steam. No one could believe it, but it turned out to be a human being. A terrifying aura burst from his body, and his purple hair was like the back of a hedgehog. Ezekiel, you bastard. You dared to outsmart an old man. What? Teacher Zephyr was too naive. It turned out to be just a game. Boom. The door was shattered with his blow, each step powerfully shaking the floor, but no one stopped him at this time. The anger in his heart burst out, and without any obstacles, he headed towards the walls of Alubarna. Ezekiel squinted his eyes and felt the spirit rushing towards him, capable of wreaking havoc. There was no doubt that it was Zephyr. I guess there's no need to worry about that. Ezekiel flexed his fingers but ultimately didn't voice his thoughts, simply saying to Fujitara, Fujitara-kun, time is running out. Of course he hopes to defeat Weeble before Zephyr arrives because it can fully emphasize the strength of Fujitara, and the world will see just how strong he is. In the end, fighting and winning are two different things. Gravity soared. Meanwhile, Fujitara was engaged with Weeble. This guy couldn't possibly have any connection to Whitebeard, let alone the combat prowess. His physique was terrifying yet absurd. Finally, Zephyr arrived and spotted Ezekiel from a distance. Zephyr was angry, freezing when he saw Fujitara's opponent, Edward Weeble. He paused, looking a bit troubled and surprised. Blue, blue, blue. At this time his portable Den Den Mushi rang. It turned out the icy threat didn't affect the Den Den Mushi. But all of Zephyr's thoughts were occupied with Edward Weeble, and he didn't answer the call for a while. It's definitely him. Zephyr muttered something under his breath, and then, as if realizing something, his expression became complex: pain, anger, hatred, disbelief, almost 10 times more intense than when Ezekiel attacked him. What the hell is going on here? He had no clue, because all of this was so unusual. Blue, blue, blue. The ringing phone snapped Zephyr back to reality, and when he answered, Zalul's voice sounded. Zephyr, it's Zalul. Now that the world government has determined that Ezekiel has rebellious ambitions, they demand that you cooperate with our people to arrest him. Zephyr was taken aback by these words. Our people? He asked in shock. The one fighting the warriors of Alabasta. He's been appointed by the world government as a Shishibukai candidate. You must support justice, it's a necessary condition, Zalul said confidently. In truth, he knew about the hatred between Weeble and Zephyr, but he believed everything could be forgotten in the name of justice. Do. Zalul wanted to say more, but the call was abruptly ended. Zephyr-san, will you compromise? He furrowed his brows and put away his golden Den Den Mushi. This call had been his actual trump card. If Zephyr truly dares to resist, he will be the first to follow in the footsteps of Ezekiel and Alabasta. Since Zephyr worked for over 50 years in the Marines, he has already gained a reputation. Even within the world government, he has many pupils. Even Garp, the hero of the Marines, looked up to him as a role model. And if such a person turns against the Marines, it would be beyond imagination. Therefore, if there is even the slightest sign of treason, no one will hesitate. He will simply be killed. To protect justice. When Zalul got about this, his face grew heavy. This is a test for you, Zephyr. Ha. Zephyr bared his teeth and forced a smile. Shishibukai. He stood in the shadows and looked a bit gloomy, but due to his usual calmness, it was hard to discern his emotions. Ezekiel saw Zephyr from a distance, standing on an elevation, and doing nothing for the moment. If he follows the orders of the world government, he will fight side by side with the pirate who killed his subordinates and students. If he decides to take revenge on Weeble, it will contradict the world government's orders. At this moment, Zephyr finally began to realize that perhaps he was wrong from the very beginning, and not only him but the whole world. The world government is not justice. You've known this for a long time. Zephyr looked at Ezekiel. And Ezekiel smiled helplessly. Teacher Zephyr, didn't you see it coming? But I advise you to stay put. However, I think for you, this is no longer just a conflict between the world government and Alabasta. The appearance of this person is a test that the world government has created for you. Zephyr closed his eyes and felt the corners of his eyes moisten. the justice he had dreamed of his entire life. Such justice isn't justice at all. Zephyr growled deeply and left his right hand made of Karaski exploding with terrifying power. Ezekiel was somewhat surprised. He certainly understood that inaction might be the most suitable choice for Zephyr at this time. But taking action would mean a serious break with the world government. You should know that in the original storyline, Zephyr simply left the Marines and never did anything wrong. He continued trying to maintain order. Boom. A huge iron fist descended from the sky, driving Weeble into the ground. The blow, full of rage, wielded the might of an admiral, enough to knock the scarred Weeble off his feet. Boom. Weeble roared and stood trembling and crying, but eventually fell unconscious to the ground from the injuries he sustained. Ma. That hurts. Zephyr disobeyed orders. The mission has failed, said the CP agent coldly, observing from a distance as he picked up the phone receiver. I see. Zalul sighed heavily. Zephyr. You chose this path after all. It seems this is the only way. He picked up the golden den mushy again. Is something wrong, Zalul-san? Came the frivolous and amusing tone from the den mushy. Admiral Kazuru. Zalul took a deep breath, as if he had 1,000 words to say, but in the end he only managed one sentence. Zephyr has betrayed us. Before his arrival, the 5 elders instructed him that if Zephyr refused to cooperate, he should be immediately arrested. If he resisted or attacked Weeble, it would be considered rebellion and a buster call should be initiated immediately. After the phone message, Kazuru fell silent, and after a long pause he chuckled. Oh, heh. Teacher Zephyr, this is quite troublesome. The previously formulated plan to deal with Alabasta has been disrupted due to the actions of the Marine Academy instructor Zephyr the Black Arm. We are forced to initiate a buster call. Zalul stated directly. There really are no other options, Kazuru sighed and smiled. Buster call. Ezekiel slowly closed his mobile phone through which he had been monitoring Zalul. He had already learned that the opposition had initiated a buster call. So, it might already be near Alabasta, and it was originally intended to combat him. It seemed he still underestimated the limits of the world government's depravity. Once a buster call was launched for O'Hara, today it is for Alabasta, where Pluton is stored. It seems that the existence of Ezekiel makes the world government feel pressured. If Cobra were in power, perhaps the other side wouldn't be so radical. With a final decision made, Ezekiel immediately ordered Weeble and Miss Bakken, who were unconscious, to be shackled with sea stone chains and locked in the palace dungeon. Mr. Zephyr, we'll turn to Zephyr. The world government has launched a buster call. Zephyr was shocked by the news, but Ezekiel's next sentence stunned him even more. This buster call was initiated precisely because of you, and is coming for you, he said. In Alabasta, where it hadn't rained for almost 6 months, rain unexpectedly started to fall. This rain was truly more precious than gold. Feeling the long-forgotten moisture, Ezekiel looked at Zephyr, who was having an internal struggle, losing the plans he had made over the past few months. Mr. Zephyr, he said, please help me. What do you want to do? Asked Zephyr. I'm already a criminal whom the world government wants dead, and all I have left is my strength. If you're not afraid of getting involved, just say the word. I'll fight for your life, even against the warlords. Zephyr understood that his current self was no longer the former admiral, but a man hated by both the Marines and the pirates. If there is still any light left for him in this world, it's the reign of the king standing before him. He is willing to make one more effort for such a country. He thinks that this king wants him to kill Crocodile. No, Ezekiel smiled. Neither the Marines nor the world government, and their justice is what I ask for. I want to establish true righteous authority. Will you help me? Zephyr took a deep breath, a little shocked by such daunting ambitions from Will, who spoke so grandly. But there was nothing impossible about what Will was saying. You want to? Lightning cut through the sky, illuminating Ezekiel's face. A blind, tall samurai stood silently behind him, holding a sword. With this millennial country and the honor of the Nefertari family, one of the 20 kingdoms, with the power of Pluton and the will of 200 million people, I will reform the world government and the Marines. Ezekiel raised his fist. Help me. In a daze, Zephyr saw those bright, incredible eyes. Perhaps it's not so impossible. In that case, the old man, too, is ready to wager the rest of his tainted life on it. So Zephyr shook off his depression, laughed loudly, and reached out his left hand to touch the young king's fist. The touch of two fists, old and young, combined with the black sky and thunder, became an eternal scene. But it was clear that Zephyr was driven not by the millennial kingdoms mentioned by Ezekiel, nor the 20 kings, nor Pluton and 200 million citizens, but by the king himself. If not for Ezekiel, another king of Alabasta could only be a slave killed by the world government. A week passed since that day, and the entire sea was shaken by a major event that occurred in Alabasta. The notorious pirate Junior Whitebeard Edward Weevil was defeated, and the Marines took him several days later, and he was knocked out. The combat power of the blind samurai Fujitora, the commander of the royal family's guards in Alabasta, was close to that of an admiral. Black Arm Zephyr betrays the world government. The world government launched a buster call in response to the actions of Admiral Black Arm Zephyr. Aboard the Moby Dick, Whitebeard, who was receiving an infusion, snatched the phone from Marco's hands. This guy almost never bought newspapers since he started using a mobile phone. Whitebeard looked skeptically at the words and pictures on the phone scrolled with his giant hand and then sighed. Zephyr. Old friend at this time. Hoo-rah rah rah. Except for a few people like Whitebeard, most pirates were gloating. After all, the number of enemies Zephyr had accumulated over the years was truly countless. It's tough to be a Marine. Once you rebel, both the pirates and the Marines become your enemies. In fact, the world government never intended to make this issue a major public matter, but Tao Shao left them no choice. The entire world never got that this man, who dedicated his life to justice, would betray the world government at the age of 70, but he did, and he dealt a harsh blow to the world government. For this reason, it can be said that the world government is doing everything possible to quickly eliminate Zephyr to save face. Ezekiel did not execute Weevil directly, not because he was soft-hearted, but because he didn't want to openly go against the world government. At this moment, the world government wants to deal with Zephyr first, and Ezekiel needs time, so a silent understanding has been reached between them. Out at sea, rain poured from the sky, merging the heavens with the sea. Zephyr sat on the deck under the torrential rain, his penetrating gaze anticipating the arrival of the pursuit. Fujitora was left to guard Alabasta. Full helm to the east. Zephyr said to the sailor, wearing a heavy cloak that hid his figure. Yes. This sailor admired Zephyr, and voluntarily followed him. Zephyr felt a bit down and sad, while Ezekiel on the contrary was happy because it turned out Kazuru was also a user of his mobile phone. This meant he had the opportunity to acquire the ability of one of the three admirals. It's almost 100 kilometers. Ezekiel was frustrated that the distance to Kazuru was still beyond the range at which he could upload. But this distance was actually dangerous because, with Kazuru's ability, he could cover it in just a few seconds. Whoosh! With a whistling sound, the sky lit up and a yellow flash of light flickered amid the thunder and pouring rain. Zephyr jumped up in horror and, without hesitation, his iron fist shot towards the flash. Boom! The explosion caused the ship's hull to shake violently. A figure in a yellow striped suit with a justice cloak appeared in the air, both hands raised. He wore a white hat and dark maroon sunglasses with a wrinkled, smiling face. It was Kazuru, one of the three admirals of the Marines. Oh, long time no see, Teacher Zephyr. Ezekiel squinted his eyes. This lazy guy was nothing special. He's just as simple as he was in the original book. He killed Admiral Zephyr in the original book and released the 11 supernovas. What do they get paid for? They do nothing against the 4 emperors. They idle away their days. They only know how to act when they're at the height of a war and have their own interests at stake. At this moment, Ezekiel discovered a notification on his mobile device. Memory, 100 GB. Advanced Armament Haki 30 GB. Enhanced Observation Haki 40 GB. Advanced Rokushiki, 20 GB. Clearly, Kazuru, who is in his 50s, had learned more than Okiji, who is in his 40s. Download Light Fruit ability. Will did not hesitate. He didn't have much combat experience, and acquiring fruits was the fastest way to become stronger. Download starting, speed is 800 kilobytes per second. This means the download will take no more than 30 hours. Fujitora dealt with Weeble in just 1 hour. How long can Zephyr hold out against Kizaru? But Zephyr was no longer the same as before, and he smiled as he considered this. Sword summoning clouds in the sky. Kizaru smiled as he conjured a golden light sword from his palm. Boom. The light sword clashed with Zephyr's massive seawater stone fist. Boom. Boom. Clang. A flash of light illuminated their faces, and Zephyr looked at Kizaru with a smirk. Do you want to fight your teacher? Kizaru dodged the blow from the mechanized arm, accurately pinpointing its weakness as described by Dr. Vegapunk. Light speed strike. Boom. Zephyr was struck hard on the shoulder, and then at the joints of the key parts, the entire mechanical arm hummed like it was malfunctioning. Damn it. Zephyr angrily recalled the weakness of the robotic arm that Vegapunk had mentioned to him, and it seemed he had told Kizaru as well. Boom. One blow after another from the light sword followed, and Zephyr's mechanical arm was finally destroyed, turning into a heap of scattered parts across the deck. Mr. Zephyr, this is impressive. Kizaru's smiling face showed surprise as he looked at Zephyr, who continued to fight. Zephyr's haki had improved significantly. It had been many years since the two sparred against each other. Zephyr coldly smiled and fiercely tore off the remnants of the broken mechanized arm and tossed it onto the deck. What, Teacher Zephyr, are you planning to give up? Kizaru smirked. Boom. The next second, a jet black fist struck him in the face, and Kizaru barely managed to raise his right hand to block the blow. This was Zephyr's only chance. Light speed strike. Kizaru's right leg shot toward Zephyr, but was blocked by Zephyr's own leg. Their attacks clashed with a blinding light, and both were momentarily held at bay. At that moment, Kizaru slowly raised his left fist, which transformed into a blazing golden light. Oh, hoo, Teacher Zephyr, goodbye, Kizaru taunted him. Just as his fist was about to descend, Kizaru was stunned, momentarily forgetting to counterattack. The veins on Zephyr's forehead strained, the air was pierced with sharp cold, and from his mangled right arm grew an icy hand. Then it was covered in ink-black armament haki. Boom. The fist struck Kizaru hard in the face. Did Teacher Zephyr use the freezing fruit ability? Could it be that Rokiji is dead? Kizaru, flying through the air, was bewildered. Is the Marine Admiral dead? Otherwise, am I hallucinating? Only Ezekiel knew the truth because he had copied Okiji's fruit power into Zephyr. Zephyr's memory limit is 280 gigabytes. He still had more than 100 gigabytes of memory left, and as a true veteran who had survived countless life and death battles, applying Okiji's top abilities combined with enhanced armament haki directly boosted Zephyr's capabilities. He had approached the level of the 4 Emperors. If he weren't so old, he could compete with the 4 Emperors. Zephyr 280 gigabytes / 280 gigabytes. Freezing Fruit 100 gigabyte. Top tier armament haki 80 gigabyte. Advanced observation haki 50 gigabyte. Advanced Rokushiki 50 gigabyte. This time, Zephyr's stats were terrifying. They were now close to Ezekiel's own stats, and this also made Ezekiel realize just how strong he could become with enough combat experience. Kizaru straightened up with the marks of the blows on his face and looked at Zephyr in astonishment. He could no longer smile. Confusion and shock filled his heart. How did all this happen? How did Zephyr acquire the freezing fruit ability? Okiji couldn't have died. Zephyr clenched his ice fist and felt stronger than ever. He had truly deflected Kizaru's attack head-on. He raised his hand high and looked at Kizaru. Come closer. My student. Zephyr shouted. Kizaru's expression changed. He quickly abandoned the idea of getting the truth out of Zephyr. After all, Zephyr was no longer with the Marines. But there were more important things right now than fighting with Zephyr. He needed to confirm whether Okiji was alive or not. Whoosh. Kizaru turned into a flash of light and disappeared into the sky. In 2 seconds, he appeared on a Marine warship 50 kilometers away. Ignoring the shocked faces around him, he immediately spoke seriously. Contact Fleet Admiral Sengoku. After listening to Kizaru's account, Sengoku was silent for a moment, then immediately dialed Okiji's number. Only upon hearing Okiji's voice did he sigh with relief. It was good that Okiji wasn't dead. So, what Zephyr has is not the freezing fruit, but an ability similar to it. As we all know, there are no two identical devil fruits. Then what should I do now? It's really terrifying. A Zephyr with the ability to freeze. Kazuru's drawling voice came over the phone, making Sengoku want to smack him. For now, follow his ship to find out the truth about his abilities. Sengoku eventually gave the cautious order after some thought. Ezekiel watched Kazuru and the others hovering within a 50-kilometer radius, all the while keeping an eye on the progress of the download. It took just a day and a half to complete the download. During that time, even if Kazuru wanted to retreat, they couldn't afford to lag behind. He had already acquired the power of 2 devil fruits, including the power of the Pika Pika no Mi. And if he simply wanted to escape, no one in this world could catch him. Boom. The collision of the laser with the ice caused countless beams of light to refract in all directions, making it difficult to keep one's eyes open. Ezekiel stood calmly on the boat, observing yet another battle between Zephyr and Kazuru, while also keeping an eye on the progress of the download. A whole day had passed, with about 10 hours remaining. During this brief period of pursuit, Kazuru reluctantly closed in and attacked once more. This time, Zephyr had fully mastered the power of the freezing fruit. The battle between 2 Logia abilities was destructive, almost completely demolishing the ship. Zephyr's right arm, which had previously shattered, was now made of ice. If this wasn't the freezing fruit, then what was it? Are there 2 identical fruits in this world? Or what did Rokiji do? The Marines know that Rokiji was recently in Alabasta. Kazuru and Zephyr held nothing back in their fight. Kazuru soared into the sky and seemed intent on destroying the ship. He crossed his arms, and his palms glowed with laser light. Yasakanai no Magatama. Seeing this, Zephyr stood at the bow with a grin, his right hand slamming fiercely onto the railing. The icy air froze along the rails. In Kazuru's ears his voice echoed. Ice Age. Boom. The entire surface of the sea was completely frozen by a terrifying layer of ice, and then it was as if the ground had folded. It looked like an iceberg had erupted from the depths of the sea. It rose vertically in front of Kazuru, who had just fired countless laser beams. Okiji, you said this has nothing to do with you. The ability of the fruit can't be identical. What's your trick? Zephyr used Ice Age. Everyone knows that even if it's the same fruit, different people will use it differently. But Zephyr's downloading ability made a perfect copy. The abilities are being used exactly as Okiji did. This definitely has something to do with Okiji. Could it be some kind of duplicate fruit? The thought flashed in Kazuru's mind that there could be a similar freezing fruit in this world. Otherwise, there's no other explanation. The battle was still not over. Kazuru now realized that Zephyr was no longer the teacher Zephyr of old. Now he was equal to Okiji himself, and perhaps Zephyr ate what seemed to be a duplicate of the fruit. Maybe it's a fruit that can copy other abilities. In reality, his guess was infinitely close to the truth, but the truth was more terrifying than his speculation. Almost all mysteries in this world originate from devil fruits. But even if Kazuru had consumed Vegapunk's brain as a tonic, he would never have guessed what kind of fruit this was. Because this was something that didn't exist in this world before, the mobile phone fruit. Your Majesty, King Ezekiel, Admiral Zephyr. After Kazuru fled, Doru, the navigator and sailor who was with them aboard, suddenly rushed out of the helm room in a hurry. He was holding broken glass and a piece of the shattered log pose. The log pose is broken. The battle between those two was just too intense. Such a fragile thing as a log pose could certainly break. In fact, according to survey statistics, many pirates die every year in the New World, and on the Grand Line for this very reason. I have another log pose, but it's currently set for Alabasta. We can return and then buy an eternal pose, Zephyr suggested. Will groaned. He didn't want to change his original plan. No, let's sail to the East Blue. But the log pose, Doru said hesitantly, fearing that Will had never been to sea and wasn't aware of its dangers. It's okay. Ezekiel took the broken log pose from his hand and tossed it into the sea. We have a solution. Looks like I'll be using the ocean map first, he got as he took out his mobile phone. At the same time, more than 8 million mobile phone users instantly received a notification about the installation of the ocean map. No one in the One Piece world could control this app, and there wasn't a single competitor. Look at your mobile phone, Ezekiel said. Doru and Zephyr immediately took out their phones upon hearing these words and soon discovered an additional function in their devices. Ocean Map. Adjust the pointer to determine the route. Current free usage time is 7 days. Ocean Map. What is that? Zephyr pressed the screen in confusion and instantly saw a huge world map with hundreds of light spots on it. He tapped on a light spot in East Blue, and immediately an arrow appeared that fixed the direction, displaying a message. 5,800 kilometers to your destination. Zephyr's pupils slightly narrowed. This arrow is almost exactly like the one used in the log pose. Can it replace the log pose? Then Zephyr pressed the coordinates for Marijua's, and a route to Marijua's location immediately appeared. He quickly tapped with his finger to pinpoint the coordinates and directions for several places. Zephyr was somewhat surprised. This thing called the ocean map can really replace the log pose. At first, people didn't care until half a day later when news about the ocean map quickly spread across news headlines and the forum. Amazing. A new feature that will shake the seas. Another groundbreaking step by Alabasta Royal Mobile. Say goodbye to log pose. Farewell, eternal pose. The risk of setting out to sea will drastically decrease. The work of sailors and traders will not be as well paid. Is this good or bad? The ocean map can be used instead of log pose, and there's no need to maintain direction or wait for a reset. Coordinates for any location appear at a touch. Incredible. The Alabasta mobile phone has this feature. Although the new mobile phone from the world government is cheap, it lacks this function. Moreover, the world government's phones are full of false propaganda. Their news updates only locally, and only people within a few dozen kilometers can communicate on their forum. Yes, the Alabasta mobile phone is so powerful that it allows people from different countries to communicate. Yesterday, I scolded a pirate who claimed to be roaming the new world. It was really enjoyable, ha ha ha. Someone recently said it was Zephyr. It truly might be Zephyr. Though this feature is powerful, it's not very useful for ordinary people, who will pay a lot of money to go to see if nothing happens there. With this I don't need to buy eternal poses and log poses. It's great. There were various opinions, but to Ezekiel's surprise, the topic did not become as popular as he imagined. This was likely because compared to ordinary people, there are still very few who can venture out to sea. Navigation is needed for ships, but how many ships exist in this world? Hundreds of thousands. 1 million. Compared to the hundreds of millions of ordinary people, this is indeed a small number. Upon reflection, Ezekiel realized that this epic-making event was not yet been taken seriously. Although, perhaps the world government and the Marines were more disappointed. The log pose and eternal pose were not that great, but now Ezekiel had utterly outdone them. Even if it's not a gold mine, it is still a magical tool in the 4 seas. Nevertheless, Ezekiel might now gain new advantages. After all, even though the increase in users is not significant, they might be influential people in this world. Perhaps Garp, Luffy, or the 4 emperors would start using mobile phones. And the lone wolfman. Once they learn the convenience of navigation via mobile phone, they should abandon the log poses. Looking at the basic navigation, Ezekiel was already contemplating how he would transition to a navigation system that could in the future pinpoint a specific street with meter-level accuracy and integrate a pleasant female voice navigation system. Then navigators and ordinary people would sleep hugging their mobile phones. Early the next morning, Ezekiel got up quite early to wait for the download, which was nearing completion. Download complete. Light fruit 100 GB. After a message that only he could see, Ezekiel felt that a wealth of information about the light fruit had appeared in his mind. He slightly opened his eyes, and yellow flashes flickered in them. At this moment, he raised both hands. One hand turned into the element of the icy domain, and the other hand into a flash of light. He had always wanted to see if he could use 2 Logia abilities simultaneously. It turns out, he could. Now half of him was a freezing person, and the other half a light person. Returning his hands to their normal state, Ezekiel stepped out. He no longer needed a ship, and had no intention of dragging it all the way to the East Blue. There were several treasures in the East Blue that he needed to acquire. Zephyr, I'm heading to the East Blue alone. You take the ship away, Ezekiel said to Zephyr. After these two had a secret conversation, Ezekiel disappeared from the deck. But as he went into the darkness, Zephyr saw a faint glow coming from Ezekiel. Zephyr paused, reaffirming his suspicion. His Majesty can replicate fruits, right? A beam of light streaked across the first half of the Grand Line. The sea was split in two by a wave of light, with endless waves surging to both sides, as a sea king burst from the depths of the sea, opening its mouth in a bloody gape. Boom! The light pierced straight into the sea king, causing a bloody rain to pour over the sea, but the light continued forward, leaving behind a massive corpse swiftly devoured by sea creatures drawn to the scent of blood. The brutal sea didn't seem daunting to Ezekiel, who now possessed the abilities of 3 fruits. He stopped and hovered in the air, took out his mobile phone, and checked his navigation. He was now very close to the entrance to the Grand Line via Reverse Mountain, but he decided not to head there. Instead, to reach the East Blue, ignoring the navigation prompt warning of route deviation, he traveled straight over the calm belt. There was no need to waste time. Although the calm belt was fearsome, Ezekiel remained high enough and moved quickly to soon reach the East Blue. The climate changed almost suddenly. The weather on the Grand Line is completely different from the East Blue. If you go to the New World, you'll find that the weather there is just as unpredictable. It seems that trying to create a weather app in this world would be nearly impossible. A complex task. Pondering the weather, Ezekiel continued to fly in a set direction. He wanted to recruit Zephyr's student, a guy with a righteous heart who hated pirates just like Zephyr. Ezekiel didn't just need a strong person, he needed an ally with strong potential. Someone like Pell. Although he reached the level of Vice Admiral, that's his upper limit. Considering this, he transformed into light and headed towards Logtown. He finally landed at the port of Logtown. At the port of Logtown, the workers were busy unloading goods. They hurried, but they were unloading cargo not from a trade ship, but from a pirate ship. "Hurry up! Hurry up!" shouted a tall pirate, waving a knife in his hand, with the members of his pirate crew standing behind him. The workers were so frightened that they moved a bit faster. Just then, the Marines suddenly appeared and surrounded the pirates. A man with white hair and cigars in his uniform slowly stepped forward. He lit a cigar and blew a smoke ring, calmly looking at the pirates. Then he said, "You guys want to die? I'm Bloody Hand, a great pirate in the East Blue. The captain of the Bloody Hand Pirates with a bounty of 5 million. Before he could finish his words, Smoker slammed his head into the ground. Bloody Hand felt a tremendous force pressing on his head and fell into a semi-coma. The Bloody Hand crew immediately shouted when they saw this. "Kill him!" A knife slashed across Smoker's back, but his body had already turned into smoke. These pirates had never seen such a strange scene. They turned pale with fear. Smoker turned and gave them a disdainful look. His hand was still on Bloody Hand's head, but his wrist and forearm were strangely separated. Smoker coldly said to the group of pirates, "This is a pirate with a bounty of 5 million. That's too weak. You'd better not stand out and wait for arrest." Smoker watched as several people were arrested one by one, then he stood up and slowly walked toward a small alley where he needed a drink. "Captain Smoker," called a clear voice as a breathless girl, Tashigi, ran up to him. "Tashigi, mind your own business," Smoker stopped and said. "Captain, please stop smoking," Tashigi replied. Smoker took out his cigar, blew another smoke ring and indifferently said, "Let women do what women are supposed to do," and with that, he turned and left, paying no attention to his attractive subordinate. It must be said that Smoker was naturally rather unsociable and lonely. However, he got along well with Tashigi and considered her his successor, even though outsiders often found it hard to understand how the two managed to work together. Tashigi was slightly annoyed. She puffed out her cheeks and watched Smoker, who was already walking ahead. HMPH. Smoker didn't seem to want her to follow him. He walked faster and faster, so by the time Tashigi arrived, Smoker had already entered a building. She exhaled and pushed the old door open. It was said that Roger had also visited this old bar 20 years ago. Oh. As soon as she entered, Tashigi's pupils suddenly narrowed. and she unhesitatingly drew her sword, she-gear hanging at her waist. This was because Smoker had been knocked to the ground by a mysterious man in a cloak. "Don't come any closer. Tashigi." Smoker's heart began to race, and he barely had the space and time to resist. In an instant, he was stopped by this mysterious man sitting in the bar. Who is he? It must be someone strong from the Grand Line. It's impossible for a powerful pirate to appear in the weakest sea, the East Blue. This man used Conqueror's haki, the haki currently holding Smoker, and this haki is possessed by one in several million people. Let go of Captain Smoker. Tashigi gritted her teeth. Ezekiel didn't even glance at her, then released Smoker. Smoker immediately retreated, shielding Tashigi. "Sorry," Ezekiel said quietly, not revealing his face, only turning toward them with his face concealed by his hooded cloak. "Who are you? Why did you attack Captain Smoker?" Tashigi remained cautious. "I didn't mean any harm, I just wanted to share some news with Smoker," but he reacted too extremely while smiled. "Who is this?" Using observation haki, I can feel the slightly terrifying force of this mysterious cloaked man. Smoker feels that even the air is distorted now. Not even from Teacher Zephyr and other admirals did he sense such power. Is this Conqueror's haki? Who is he? Ezekiel seemingly conjured two mobile phones out of thin air and tossed them to Smoker and Tashigi. Z, he uttered just one word, and Smoker's pupils immediately narrowed. Z. Although this code name had not yet appeared in this world, Smoker instantly understood who owned this name. Zephyr the Black Arm. He paused for a moment, then pulled out a cigar, lit it, took a deep drag, exhaled a ring of smoke, and sat on a chair. Now he realized that Ezekiel truly did not intend to fight him. After all, when two people of such vastly different levels of power meet, it would not take even a second to kill the weaker one. Smoker 65 GB / 230 GB. Advanced use of the smoke fruit 50 GB. Advanced armament haki 10 GB. Basic observation haki 5 GB. Tashigi 10 GB / 200 GB. Advanced swordsmanship 10 GB. As he got, none of the characters from the original storyline could be an individual with low potential. The maximum potential of these two people reaches 230 and 200 GB. If they can be recruited, they could become powerful in this world. They could reach the level of an admiral. This is a mobile phone invented by the royal family from the Grand Line, Alabasta. It functions like a den mushy phone but also has some special features. If needed, this phone will connect you with me or this lovely lady, Ezekiel said with a smile. I don't need your things. Tashigi immediately responded with determination. This is the fastest platform for spreading information in the world. If you want to find out something, like the whereabouts of some famous swords, this would be the best way, Ezekiel explained. Tashigi hesitated immediately and finally said, gritting her teeth, but I still don't know how to use it, yet she did not return the phone to Ezekiel. Who are you? Smoker asked. Ezekiel smiled mysteriously, you'll find out in the near future. Then he left the bar, found a secluded spot and vanished. He immediately informed Zephyr that he had met with his student Smoker and had given him a mobile phone. Ezekiel provided Zephyr with Smoker's phone number, indicating that Smoker was a target for recruitment. Smoker and Tashigi held their breaths under the aura of this mysterious man. The two exchanged glances and remained silent for a long time. Finally, Smoker turned on the phone. He had never heard of it. Information about the existence of mobile phones had not yet reached here, as mobile phones appeared on the Grand Line, and Logtown is the entrance to the Grand Line, meaning sailors only enter Logtown on their way to the Grand Line, not on their return. Ring, ring, ring. The phone in his hand suddenly rang, and Smoker was taken aback. But he wasn't a fool, and didn't toss it away like a bomb. He looked at the prompt on the screen and pressed the phone to his ear. Is this Smoker? A familiar voice came through the receiver. Smoker shivered all over, then unconsciously sat down and said, yes. Teacher Zephyr. But he soon realized he was no longer in the Marine Academy. Tashigi was in shock. Teacher Zephyr. Could it be that Zephyr the Black Arm, Admiral Criminal? She didn't know Smoker was his student, but she knew that Zephyr was now a criminal wanted by the world government and the Marines. Although he's not a pirate, he is still a wanted criminal, accused of betraying the world government and conspiring with pirates. How could Captain Smoker be talking to him? I'm no longer a Marine. Zephyr sighed weakly. Smoker, with your potential, there's no need to stay in Logtown. You need to head to the Grand Line. If you're willing to listen to me, I'll share some words and tell you everything I've been through, and then perhaps you'll consider making your choice. Mr. Zephyr, I don't want to be a pirate, Smoker insisted firmly. Zephyr didn't reply directly. He didn't bother with such questions. He simply said, there is a king of a country with whom I agree, and he wants to establish a new Marines. Would you like to help him? Smoker's and Tashaiji's hearts suddenly trembled. It was as if chills rose from the soles of their feet to the top of their heads. They realized that the mobile phone in their hands was more than just a danger, and they finally understood the real reason why Zephyr was wanted. What are these grand ambitions? To form a new Marines. He wants to overthrow the world government. And he's just talking about it as if it's really normal. Tashigi looks at Smoker in bewilderment. She felt a chill. You won't do this, Smoker-san. Although Smoker looks a bit sinister, and those who don't know him usually think of him as a vicious pirate, in reality, he is a positive character. And even though Zephyr's words stirred his heart a bit, he is not the type to make decisions when his mind is heated. He still needs some time. After Ezekiel left Logtown, he headed straight to Kokoyasi village in East Blue. Now that he had arrived in East Blue, the first thing he needed to do was find the little thief because of her unusual talent as a navigator and the suffering she was enduring at that time. The streets of Kokoyasi village were somewhat dirty due to the destruction by the fishmen pirates. The villagers had been oppressed by the pirates for a long time, and their spirit had weakened. Ezekiel walked through the street and saw almost no one. Once he encountered a child who ran out of the house alone. The child quickly disappeared around the corner of the street upon seeing Ezekiel. Only when Ezekiel reached the very center of the village did he see a man wrapped in many bandages, who seemed to be severely injured. This was the local sheriff, Mr. Genzo from Kokoyasi village. Ezekiel pondered for a while before he remembered him. Hey, stranger, I don't know how you got here, but I advise you to leave this island as quickly as possible. There's nothing for you here. Genzo paused. Looking at Ezekiel out of kindness, he offered appropriate advice to the mysterious figure cloaked in a cape. I'm a trader, Ezekiel smiled. I heard there are special mandarins here that can only grow in East Blue, so I want to buy plenty. Can you help me? Genzo paused briefly. He heard Ezekiel's rather immature voice and realized that the person before him was quite young. Ezekiel opened his cloak, revealing his harmless appearance. Genzo sighed with relief. It turned out that he was just an unassuming young man, though apparently not a poor one. He must be a young gentleman from some noble family. How much do you want? Genzo was even more at ease because selling mandarins would be beneficial for Kokoyasi village. Especially now, with a pirate crew in control, no trader dared to visit this island. Perhaps this young man was merely a fool or fearless of pirates. I'm offering 100 million berries for the mandarins, Ezekiel said. 100 million berries. Genzo repeated his words, and then his pupils suddenly narrowed. But how many mandarins do you need then? I'm paying 100 million berries a year for 100 million bags of mandarins, Ezekiel replied. 100 million berries every year. Genzo was in shock. He looked at this young gentleman, his lips trembling. What the hell? Is he joking? And you? You're willing to pay 100 million berries? He asked. Ezekiel slowly pulled out a thick contract with the seal of an official bank of Alabasta, and the signature of the King of Alabasta. Alabasta is a large kingdom located on the Grand Line, with a population of over 220 million people, but this country lacks vitamin-rich fruits, so the king entrusted me with purchasing them worldwide. The current annual budget for this is 1 billion berries. 100 million berries is just an insignificant amount for the country. Ezekiel wasn't joking. Alabasta is after all a desert country, a place where fruits are genuinely needed, and nothing could impress a small thief more than this. Genzo suspiciously took the contract in his hands, carefully read every word, and after reading, finally looked up and skeptically said, "The aforementioned Alabasta will pay 100 million berries in the first year. Is this true?" Ezekiel looked at Genzo and genuinely felt sorry for him, as he had never seen the world. After all, even 10-year-old Nami could do everything possible to earn 100 million berries, no matter what method she uses. This sufficiently demonstrates that 100 million berries is actually nothing. And from a commercial perspective, purchasing 100 million bags of mandarins and sending them to Alabasta is equivalent to at least 1 billion bags. So Ezekiel would indeed show the middle finger to those pirates who go out to sea for money. Why be a hopeless pirate in such a wealthy world, where you can simply earn? Even many years later, the bounty for an emperor will reach 5 billion berries. Just look, how can this be taken seriously? Although the bounty for any emperor is merely 5 billion berries, the wealth they possess might not amount to 400 billion. Ezekiel wanted to use money to pave the way, break through this world, and show them the true power of finance. Hey guys! What do you think about money? Moldy treasure kept somewhere over there is not treasure at all. Young sir, I don't know your name. Genzo started speaking more cautiously after he was almost sure of the truth. Call me Ezekiel. Ezekiel smiled. The name Ezekiel was not associated by people with the King of Alabasta, Ezekiel Nefertari. Then Genzo politely invited Ezekiel to Nami's house. According to him, all the tangerines and kokoyasi were planted with the help of Ezekiel's family. After all, planting is a science too. The two of them walked, talking and laughing, and they had a good rapport with each other. Now Genzo didn't suspect the young man of lying. Such behavior is definitely not common for ordinary people and impossible for a liar. This calmness and nobility cannot be artificially created. This person must have a high status in Alabasta. By the way, he came from the Grand Line. When Genzo and Ezekiel approached the large mandarin field, they saw a girl with orange hair secretly picking mandarins in the distance. "Mr. Genzo, do you have a thief in your village?" Ezekiel said with a smile, knowing that this was his target, Nami, who was only 16 years old. Genzo's eyes widened, blue veins appeared on his forehead. He took a deep breath and then roared. Nami. They had received an enormous order of 100 million berries per year. Genzo would really beat Nami to death at Belmir's grave. Nami flinched and stood up and cursed. "Why are you yelling? Tired of living?" She seemed to have no concept of respect for elders. But Genzo was truly like a father to her. Ezekiel knew that this was just their way of expressing their feelings. Nami grimaced, but noticing that Genzo was not alone, she approached them. She had short orange hair, a delicate face, and cunning black eyes. From time to time she glanced at Ezekiel, and soon her eyes seemed to take the shape of money symbols. The stranger's clothing looked ordinary, but those fabrics were worth at least hundreds of thousands of berries. A simple headband, but in reality it was made of golden thread. The belt at his waist was encrusted with rare black gemstones. What was that modest little detail on the shoes? Is that a diamond? This outfit is worth millions of berries. Where did that damn old man Genzo find this noble young gentleman? This is so unfair. If he has acquaintances like this, just let me add something. My progress in saving would certainly improve significantly, right? Nami obviously noticed more in Ezekiel's appearance than Genzo did, and her expression almost instantly softened. She then spoke in a sweet tone that sent shivers down Genzo's spine. "Excuse me, who is this young gentleman?" Ezekiel's smile froze on his face. He knew Nami's character and talents. But did he really not avoid her expert gaze, unerringly identifying incredible wealth even though he was dressed so modestly? Genzo's expression darkened, and he even slapped his own face with his palm. At this moment Nojiko heard the noise outside, came out of the house, and saw Nami talking with Genzo and a stranger. "Nami, you're back." Nami hugged her shoulders and immediately changed her expression. "By the way, I just picked some mandarins to bring them to you." Genzo and Ezekiel exchanged glances, saw the understanding in each other's eyes, and smiled. "It looks like Genzo brought this young gentleman to discuss something." "Then please, come in and have a seat," said Nojiko. Inside the house of Nami and Nojiko, a few people sat down, and Genzo introduced them to each other. This is Nojiko, and her sister Nami. Please don't pay her any mind. Genzo saw the greedy and almost infatuated eyes of Nami sitting next to Ezekiel and felt a bit helpless. He mustn't let this little thief get a hold of Mr. Ezekiel's money. Nami, Nojiko, this is Mr. Ezekiel, a major businessman from the Grand Line of Alabasta. He came to Kokoyasi to buy our tangerines. Genzo looked at Nami in a particular way when he mentioned the purchase, and Nami raised her eyebrows. In Genzo's words, she heard too much information. First of all, people who came from the Grand Line. That's already a rarity in the East Blue. Even pirates with high bounties don't dare to claim they come and go freely from the Grand Line. Someone from the Grand Line in East Blue, really? Secondly, he's a major businessman who wants to buy their tangerines. In Genzo's opinion, who can be called a major businessman, and are tangerines worth such a risk that they would make a major businessman travel back and forth between the Grand Line and East Blue? This is truly suspicious. Sparks flicker in Nami's eyes. What is this guy's objective? Genzo handed the contract to Nojiko. Ezekiel waited calmly. Before Nojiko could start looking at the contract, Nami snatched it and scanned through it. The contract for acquisition by the royal family of the Kingdom of Alabasta. The amount is 100 million berries. Every year. Any type of fruits with a priority on tangerines. The seal of the Bank of Alabasta, and the signature of His Majesty the King. Alabasta can immediately pay 100 million berries. While reading, Nami's expression changed dramatically. 100 million berries each year. No wonder Genzo was so serious and brought him here. Nami looked at Ezekiel, her eyes gradually turning into hearts, then into money signs, and finally she seemed about ready to cling to Ezekiel. Mr. Ezekiel, our tangerines are wonderful. When will you pay the 100 million berries? Nojiko and Genzo twisted their mouths. Nami, do you really not feel embarrassed asking Mr. Ezekiel such a direct question like that? Does she honestly think he carries 100 million berries with him? And honestly, there probably aren't currently 100 million sacks of tangerines in Kokoyasi. In the past, Kokoyasi barely managed to grow 100 million sacks of tangerines after a year of hard work, and now pirates are in charge here. 100 million berries, Ezekiel smiled slightly. That's a big sum, and I didn't bring it with me. But there is the Syrup family, major merchants of East Blue, who have an agreement with me. These funds can be accessed by Kokoyasi via this contract on Syrup Island. Meanwhile, their fleet is responsible for transporting goods, but I understand it's hard for you to simply believe this. Therefore, to demonstrate my sincerity. As he said this, he produced an exquisite and magnificent large blue gemstone. Alabasta is a country rich in gems and gold, but this gemstone wasn't mined in Alabasta. It is the heart of the ocean, a renowned pearl. Its value exceeds 100 million berries. I will leave it as collateral. Once the Syrup family transfers 100 million berries to you, it will be redeemed. Before Ezekiel finished his sentence, the gemstone was already in Nami's hands. Sir, no problem. At the sight of this enormous gemstone, the eyes of all three lit up. They could see it wasn't a fake. It was definitely not a fake, and it's worth 100 million berries. But there are countless people like Nami here in Kokoyasi, and this concerns Genzo. And will Nami return this gemstone after the village receives 100 million berries? The two of them looked at each other as if they shared the same gods, and at the same time, they understood what was in each other's hearts. She can do it. Ezekiel smiled as he noticed Nami nearly drooling at the sight of the jewel. The origin of this gem is not simple. It's a deep-sea treasure, obtained from Fishman Island. It was a gift from Her Royal Highness Otoheim of Fishman Island several decades ago when she signed a friendship treaty with Alabasta during the World Summit. Thus Alabasta acquired the treasure valued at over 100 million berries. It was worth $1 billion. What if Arlong saw this jewel? As he got about it, Ezekiel's smile turned a bit sinister. Nami hesitated but responded with a smile to this wealthy and generous young gentleman. This jewel would be enough to buy Kokoyasi back from the wicked Arlong. As the village representative, Genzo signed a contract with Ezekiel. Then I won't keep you any longer. Ezekiel stood up. I have other matters to attend to. Thank you for your hard work and help. Genzo seemed as if a huge weight had been lifted from his heart. Ezekiel believed that his intentions were pure. He simply wanted Nami to see in advance that everything she was doing did not actually matter to Arlong's ruling pirate gang. It makes no sense. How can a pirate crew, which collects tens of millions of berries every month from Kokoyasi village, and has amassed over 1 billion berries in 6 years, leave the village for 100 million berries? It's a deceit. In the original story it's mentioned that the fishmen pirates charge each person 100,000 berries every month and 50,000 berries for a child, or they will be killed. In the end, when Nami bids farewell to the villagers of Kokoyasi, it is evident that the population of the village is at least several hundred people. Even if there are 200 of them, that's at least 10 million berries, which amounts to more than 100 million a year. It can be said that Kokoyasi was once a very wealthy village. Ever since Arlong arrived, their resources have been almost depleted over the last few years. This year Ezekiel gave Genzo 100 million berries. It's their hope for survival. They will be able to pay Arlong's pirates. And even if the village doesn't earn a single berry from mandarins, it will still be enough. Nami, with some excitement, carried the heart of the sea depths and burst into the base of Arlong's pirates. Arlong! I did it! She shouted to the fishman, who looked at her with interest. The tall, saw-nosed shark fishman with blue skin grinned and raised his glass looking at Nami. Let's drink, our navigator. All the fishmen around also looked at her with grins, and almost no one took her seriously. Nami pulled out the heart of the sea depths. This enormous gemstone sparkled in the sunlight. In an instant, all the fishmen stopped laughing. They stared at the gem, showing unbelievable disbelief. This heart of the sea depths is worth 100 million berries. I want to buy back Kokoyasi village. That's what you promised me, Arlong. Nami said, staring at Arlong and feeling that something was off with the atmosphere. In the next moment, Arlong appeared in front of her, grabbing her neck with one hand. He easily took the gem from her hand and looked at it for a moment. Finally, he brought his face closer to Nami's, gazing at her with a somewhat terrifying expression. He said to her, "This gem. Where did you get it?" Nami was slightly breathless as Arlong threw her to the ground. Hey! You said I could buy back the village for 100 million berries. You promised to free Kokoyasi. Arlong's face was very grim. This gem reminded him of a rather unpleasant event. He did not respond to Nami's words but coldly said, 100 million berries. Do you realize what kind of stone this is? It's the secret treasure of my people, the heart of the sea depths. Worth 1 billion berries, which was shamelessly given to humans decades ago. In other words, this is our stone, and I want to thank you for returning it to my hands, Nami. Nami was shocked. 1 billion berries. The secret treasure of the fishmen. Ha 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 ha. The fishmen around laughed. There will be a feast today. Nami's eyes reddened in an instant, and tears welled up. You never intended to free the village. She finally shouted angrily, voicing what she had never dared to believe. In reality, a perceptive girl like her couldn't ignore the fact that Arlong wouldn't easily free Kokoyasi village, but there was hope. In the end, there were no other options. Everyone stopped smiling and the expression on the malicious Arlong's face became even more terrifying. Since you asked directly, I'll tell you straight, Nami. You're a navigator I value. But even if you bring 100 million berries, I will never keep my promise. I am a pirate. Oh. Why should I keep promises to humans? Nami, you're too naive. Nami was utterly shocked by these words. She slowly got up under the laughter of the fishmen and left the pirate base in despair. Inside her soul, there was nothing but despair and sadness. Ezekiel stood before her, and Nami looked up in confusion, remembering what he had told her about the heart of the sea depths valued at 100 million berries. It's not 100 million berries at all, but 1 billion berries. What should she and the village of Kokoyasi do now, having lost such a sum? Do you know about Arlong? I'm sorry, I lost your precious stone. She got that Genzo and Nojiko had told Ezekiel about Arlong, otherwise, why would he be here? Nami didn't dare tell Ezekiel that his precious stone was already in Arlong's hands. Internally, Nami feared he might go to Arlong and end up hurt or even killed. The girl rested her head on Ezekiel's shoulder. Seeing this, Ezekiel sighed. The precious stone is not important at all, Nami. The most important thing is you, Ezekiel said, gently patting her head. Next. It's my business. Nami stopped crying, grabbed Ezekiel's clothes tightly, and said through tears. Don't go. I really lost it. I will return it to you. Even if it takes my entire remaining life. Right now, only this person can help the village of Kokoyasi. If something happens to him, then everything is truly over. Ezekiel became the last hope in Nami's eyes. Even if she had to die, she did not want an accident to happen to Ezekiel. Under Nami's intense gaze, Ezekiel slowly took off his heavy coat and cloak, carefully placing them in her hands. He raised his fingers, and the tips of his fingers lit up brilliantly. The glow was so bright that Nami couldn't keep her eyes open. Nami, if you could be free, what would you want to do the most? His voice became low. Whoosh. A laser pierced the sky, and under Nami's stunned gaze, it illuminated everything around, and then exploded with a deafening sound. The tall buildings of the entire pirate base were destroyed, and the largest building was blown up, leaving a deep crater in its place. Countless maps that Nami had drawn for the Arlong pirates in the past were scattered into the air like snow in the sky. They were set ablaze by the heat of the laser, burning up and disappearing. A gust of wind lifted Ezekiel's clothes and hair, and endless beams of light appeared before his eyes. He seemed like a god on earth saving the suffering people. This scene was forever etched in Nami's eyes, and she would never forget it. He stood before her like a man descended from the heavens. If you could be free, what would you want to do the most? Nami is only 16 years old. She imagined being able to escape from the fisherman pirates, avenge Belmere, save everyone and fulfill her dreams. But faced with harsh reality, all fantasies seem so illusory. Perhaps her best future is to do everything she can to help kill her mother's enemies and humbly protect Kokoyasi village from their hands. But on this day, a strange guy appeared. He stood there calmly with an almost invincible presence, and shattered her nightmare with a single blow. The light piercing through the world made it impossible for her to open her eyes. Are you a god? If so, why save me as a sinner? Nami's eyes blurred, and tears couldn't stop streaming down her face. Who are you? Damn it. At that moment, an angry shout came from nearby, and a large group of fishermen rushed in at an extremely high speed. Leading them was Arlong, who looked somewhat embarrassed. His clothes were damaged, hanging in tatters. He sneered, baring his teeth fiercely, and yelled at Ezekiel, who stood next to Nami. Is it you, kid? He was almost hysterical. In this huge base were important supplies that he wanted to take with him to the Grand Line. You dared to throw explosives at our base. Damn you. Kurubi, the fishman Ray, stood up, assumed a karate stance, and resolutely stared at Will. Kill him, roared the furious Arlong. Fishman karate, the brick-breaking punch of 1000. Kurubi let out a low growl, and his body dashed toward Ezekiel, his fist fiercely twisting as a spinning whirlwind of air rushed along with his hand toward the target. This guy is dead. He unexpectedly made Kurubi very angry, and he used his special technique. The brick-breaking punch of 1000. The skinny man probably can't even withstand the wind from the fist, right? Got Arlong's crew when. A sharp sound echoed, catching everyone off guard. Ezekiel didn't move as Kurubi's fist aimed directly at his cheek, but it didn't reach its target as expected. The fist suddenly felt sharp pain. Smashing into a piece of unbreakable hard steel with terrifying force, his fist was almost completely shattered. Only due to the physical characteristics of the fishman Ray did he not die from the pain. Nami stared blankly at the enraged Arlong, who she once thought of as a great mountain, but he was bewildered by this very sunny-looking boy so easily, with just one blow. Let him die. But who is this guy? Hey, boy. Who the hell are you? Is this the Marines? Asked one of the fishermen with a trembling voice. Ezekiel didn't answer. He saw fear and hatred in the eyes of the surrounding fishermen. Nami, do you want to kill Arlong? He's to blame for everything. I can't forgive this. Nami gritted her teeth. Ezekiel smiled. Nami, she's still such a kind girl, meaning that besides Arlong, she didn't blame the other fishmen. In fact, none of those present knew that this was his first true killing. Although he killed fishmen with his explosion. There's no so-called Naja probably because he's too powerful. It's easier than killing an ant. For him, it was easy to take someone's life. The reason why the devil fruit is called devilish lies in this true reason. So, if you have power but lack the corresponding experience, it's easy to stray off the path. For more fanfictions and 60+ chapters in advance, follow me on Patreon. The link is in the description below.